Welcome into another edition of the Lock It Up with Kurtz podcast. Here's a part of KCSN. I am John Kurtz, joined by former K-State wide receiver Aaron Lockett. We are not live in Manhattan this time. We are back in our typical spot as we get you ready for K-State and Kansas and recap the K-State TCU game, which fortunately we are talking about another Wildcat victory. The Cats are now 5-3. They won this game really going away 31-12. It was 31-5 before a garbage time touchdown that TCU scored late. So there is plenty of reason to celebrate right now. And that means you should be pouring up the 360 vodka to do so and make sure that you get it in before you head to Lawrence on Saturday. If you're going there, like I likely will be for the 11 a.m. kickoff this Saturday. Definitely want to do that. Appreciate all their support with everything that we did in Manhattan this past weekend. If you were there, I'm sure you got a chance to try out some of the 360 vodka. It is awesome, and they can do whatever it is that you want with it. Cocktail creations are endless. Craft cocktails, batch drinks, infusions. Your drinking choice is covered, man, with 360 Vodka and Holiday Distillery. These guys have been awesome in helping us at KCSN. But, Aaron, man, really fun game. Probably the most fun watch of the year for K-State. Maybe Stanford rivals that. But, I mean, K-State came out and controlled the game basically from start to finish against TCU. Gary Patterson with a pretty pitiful performance got himself fired essentially after the game. But, I mean, you do have to give a lot of credit to K-State and what the Wildcats did as well, seemingly playing with a lot more confidence after the win over Texas Tech.
No, I agree. I thought K-State came out and handled business the way that we were expecting. But, you know, my time in Manhattan was great. I don't know if you can see here. Got me a brand new shirt. I'm ready to roll. I put down my next page shirt just for this K-State shirt today just because I thought they played exceptional. We've been talking about putting it all together. We've been talking about Skylar delivering. Here comes Vaughn, Deuce doing what he normally does. And then you've got Menabebe catching the ball down the middle. Like, it was just a fun time. It felt like old school K-State football, right? You got ahead. Penalties weren't just as bad. And then we had somebody be superb, as we always talked about, on defense. And so excited to talk about that here today. But another win, another coach fired. You know, interesting trend, you know, moving on in the Big 12.
Yeah, and I mean, look, there were a lot of things I thought Gary Patterson did very poorly in the way that he coached and kind of managed the game, but I don't think any of it ultimately affected the outcome of the game. K-State was a better team. I mean, Gary Patterson and TCU, they just seem kind of lost right now. But, I mean, frankly, we're starting to get an answer to the question of, like, was it more the schedule for K-State to start Big 12 play with the three teams that they did in Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State versus – is it that K-State is a bad team? And I think what you're seeing is more of like a regression to the mean, which is a positive thing for K-State in this case, in that they did play three really tough games to start the Big 12 schedule. They have been a little less mistake prone, at least against TCU, or probably a little bit less sloppy, clean some things up, and that certainly has helped. They've made some big plays. That certainly has helped. I think it's just a combination of everything. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, I will still continue to say, like, I thought this team was like a 7-5-ish kind of a team going into the season. And most of what we've seen this year has not really pushed me one way or the other on that, which includes winning games like this against teams in Texas Tech and TCU that are certainly beatable and on K-State's level, if not a little bit lower.
You know, I don't know if his injuries are starting to get better now. I mean, you look at some of the play that's taking place. You know, you look at you know, Reggie coming off the blitzes now. You know, it doesn't seem like his hand is bothering him as much. Julius Brent doesn't seem to have the hand injury as much, able to kind of jam a little bit. And so seems like we're getting comfortable in our own skin, right? People are getting a little bit more. We still have this rotation thing going on that just baffles me, right? Every time I turn around, I'm looking for Julius Brent and I see Dennison in there, which is fine. It's just a matter of, wow, as they transition that much, but it's working for them, right? They're getting fresh bodies out there. People are getting lined up, making plays. I'm starting to see some confidence. I'm starting to see some players separate themselves from others. And so it'll be exciting to see what these next couple of games look like, but totally satisfied with the way they played TCU from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think big picture, the team is still tracking at about where I thought they would be at this point, 5-3 through 8 games. You'll definitely take it. They played a pretty tough schedule when you combine the non-conference in there as well. Now, as to why it's turned around, why it is getting better, I mean, I mentioned, hey, they were a little less sloppy against TCU. That certainly wasn't the case against Texas Tech. They were still very sloppy, but got the win. I think the biggest difference and ultimately what has gotten it done the last few weeks has been defense. And that was not there, obviously, in the first 3 Big 12 games. The defense had all sorts of problems. Now we've seen 6 straight quarters of pretty good football out of the defense. I mean, I mentioned they had TCU held to 5 points there before a garbage time touchdown. They got the big game-changing play with the safety that Anyedike Uzama forced against Texas Tech. And, man, speaking of him, he played one of the best games that you've ever seen a K-State football player play, where he gets screwed out of the 2 extra sacks because they were fumbles that went forward, which is just a ridiculous rule. He's getting punished for strip sacks as opposed to actual sacks or just regular sacks. But either way, one of the most dominant individual performances we've seen. I don't know if that accounts for everything that we're seeing right now defensively, improvement-wise, but, man, across the board, that defense just looks so much better, much more active, much more lively, and much more like the defense that we saw for the first couple games of the season.
You know, as I think about a defensive end perspective, I played with some of the greats, right? Didn't get a chance to play with Niall Wyron, but I played with D. Howard. I played with Andrew Scholl. I played with Monty Beisel. I played with Chris Johnson. That performance by far was one of the best. It reminded me of Darren Howard so much. But coming around the edge, just a pursuit on the back end side, the strip. Like, I was impressed by how often he was making a play. And you can see his confidence rising every play, every series. And so for me, it was electric to see that on the field and be a part of that. But I also think the secondary is playing better. I think Russ Yeast is starting to find his position. I think J Mack is starting to find his. Like I said, the corners, they do a lot of rotating in, but they're blitzing a lot more. And it just seems to be more variety from a defensive perspective right now.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about that. And there was something Chris Kleiman said at his press conference today that really stuck with me as far as what could be helping out the secondary. But, man, as far as Felix Anyedike Uzama is concerned with the 6 sacks and everything that happened there, like, Aaron, from a football perspective, I'm going to rely on your football mind here. Like, there have to be something. Like, TCU is the 3rd most talented team in the Big 12. Recruiting ranking wise, they're behind Texas and Oklahoma, and that's it. Right. There are players on that roster. Gary Patterson is a good football coach, and I'm not to take anything away from Anyedike Uzama, who's clearly headed for a potential All-American season. But, like, you can't do something to slow him down a little bit after the 3rd, 4th, 5th sack. I was amazed that they couldn't find some way to double him, chip him, whatever it is. Football-wise, there has to be something schematically I would think you could do to take him out of the game.
Well, normally you bring the running back over to chip, right? So you would chip him, make him hold another 1.5 seconds, and then the quarterback's got to get the ball out of his hands. A lot of those sacks, like I said, he came around the back end, quarterback stepped up, and instead of running, he was still looking to throw the ball. And so it was just the hustle and effort sacks. And so those are kind of hard to say, you know what, did he block it well? He blocked it well enough. Could he get the ball out of his hands in time? Maybe not. But if you look at TCU, massive tackles. I don't know how close you were to the field, but I mean, I don't know how tall they were. At least 6'6", 6'7" guys, you know, on the bookends. And so it's a little bit of, hey, man up. That's your guy, right? And so a little bit of pride there, along with not chipping, led to the performance that we got a chance to witness.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, and especially later, a couple of those sacks I can definitely remember. It's like Anyedike Uzama like peeling off and getting the sack later in the play.
There you go.
But even in that, he gets hustle plays down the field where he's tackling running backs, you know, keeping 10, 15-yard gains from becoming 25, 30-yard gains. I mean, that's what you really love about him. He's as humble a guy as you could ever imagine. I mean, I watched his post-game interview sessions, and, like, he was just like, hey, man, I wish I got 7. I wish I had that. Like, this is okay, but I've got 600 messages on my phone. I just want to call my mom, though. I'm not going to get back to her. Like, very, very humble. Yeah. Very, very humble reaction there. And you can tell his teammates love him by the way everybody reacted on the sideline to what was going on there. And I think one thing that seems to be helping the defense out, it's something that Chris Kleiman has stressed for weeks now, is just trying to simplify the defense and not get too complicated and go back to basics. And I heard him say today at his press conference Tuesday when we're taping this, that it's as simplified, it's as close to like just the base defense as they have been over the last 2 weeks, and they've seen the dividends from that. And it's very interesting to me. I mean, it's year 2 of Joe Klanderman installing his defense, but year 1 was obviously through a pandemic. You probably didn't have as much time to get in as much as you want. So they probably are still like further behind than you would even typically be in year 2 of getting a defense installed there. But whatever they're doing, they should stick with it. I mean, I'm not here to say that I have a strong opinion one way or the other on like what the balance is. I'm not a coach. I don't know how you balance trying to install more of what you want to do versus making sure guys know what they're doing and playing fast. But it sure seems to be working right now, just dumbing some things down for the guys.
Yeah, in football terms, it's mano a mano, right? You versus him, who can win, and so that's where you put your best players on the field and see if they can beat the person across from them, and if that can happen, you'll get those results. And so obviously we were winning on the defensive end side of the ball. Like I said, I'm starting to see more blitzes, and that's actually something that's speeding up the offense as well. Great coverage on the back end. I didn't see them try Echo at all, right? I sat there and watched Echo, was waiting for them to see if there's a dig on him or a deep route, and just he constantly covered his man. And so, he's not getting many balls on the outside, which is a great thing, right? I'm waiting to see that 4.39 speed that we talked about earlier in our podcast, right? But they won't throw a ball over 20 yards is waiting. So I guess they've watched it on film and they can see that. But for the most part, playing back at the stadium, playing back in Manhattan, Kansas was something that I think they needed, right? They got the tough win at Texas Tech. They came back home. Crowd was rocking. Once again, we're 5-3 now, right? 2 weeks ago, we were 3-3 thinking that, oh God, are we going to make it to a bowl game? We just don't look like we're very good. But the reality of it is, as you mentioned, tough schedule, right? Oklahoma State, you turn around, look at the OU game, you turn around, look at the Iowa State game. I mean, for the most part, those are three of the top tier teams in the Big 12. And so I think we're coming right where we need to come, a little bit later than we wanted, but we're still coming. As long as we finish strong, I think it should be a season that we're proud of.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I love about the defense, tack on to that discussion too, is just the red zone defense. They did not have a single red zone stop the entire season before what happened in that game against TCU, which is, I mean, look, that's now that, there have been some field goals, but not just shutting teams out. And on a couple of occasions, they got that done against TCU. Obviously, that was huge, and it was very important in the momentum of the game, bigger picture there. But I mean, hey, even the offense, I think the offense continues to do its thing, like generally be pretty productive, even in a game where they lost Malik Knowles for a while. They lost Phillip Brooks for a while. They lost Tyrone Howell for a while when he was over defending his quarterback on the sideline with the skirmish. I mean, which, look, we can all be honest, those just an absurdly late hit.
Right.
I guess you'd call it dirty. I don't know what the point was really of that hit at that point in time. So it's rough that you're going to lose Tyrone Howell for the first half of the KU game because of that. But fighting through some adversity, fighting through some loss of some of the explosive playmakers like Joe Irvin, who also wasn't available for a virus, they still found a way to make plays and be productive enough.
Yeah, I think offensively, like I said, we were able to move the chains. Had a couple of runs that just stalled in the middle, but you keep the defense honest when you do that. We always seem to have this one odd interception that's starting to become a trend, though, right? It's that one turnover where it's like, it's a high thrown ball. Last game that they got intercepted, and this time it was a corner route, to the tight end that fell just a little bit short. It thought it went out of bounds, but guy made a great play on that. So as we continue to work and clean those up, because they're going to happen during the game, right? It's all about field position, right? And so I thought that we did a good job on that. The return game, subpar, right? I think there was a couple of times we probably bought the ball out a little bit deep in the end zone a little bit. Obviously playmakers behind there, but you don't get many chances, right? And so you just got to be smart in some of those situations. But for the most part, continue to work on what we're doing best. But hey, Deuce, once again, I think we say it every week, like we're riding his coattail. Like he's making play after play after play. And so I love the play where they handed him the ball off coming off the right side. I think he hit the A gap, and they had a blitz coming on the backside. You saw the safety just trailing him as he came right around. And then Deuce used the speed, outran him and to the end zone. And so once again, continue to utilize what we have and keep playing well. But we were in control of that whole game against TCU.
Total control. I have a couple of Daniel Matterbebe questions here. One more negative, one more positive. The negative one, so you referenced that interception, which I think, look, it was not a great decision by Skyler to throw that ball. If you throw it, it's probably going to be earlier. But I did have someone say to me, like, well, couldn't a Matterbebe have helped him out, like tried to fight a little bit more for the ball. So I'm curious as a receiver, your opinion there on that, if it's totally on the quarterback or if there should be a little bit more fighting going on the part of the receiver or the ball catcher in that case. Yeah,
ideally you would want him to fight a little bit more, but you got to think about your personnel, right? At the size that he is, running a corner route, looking for the ball over the top, over the left-hand shoulder, and it was thrown to where it's almost like we would call that if it's sitting there and you want to flatten it out like an out route. His turn direction is probably not as quick as the receivers. And so to expect him to turn and to be able to cut underneath the safety and knock it down was probably a little bit hard for him to change direction that quickly. And so just a combination of knowing personnel and being a flat throw where it didn't get over the top out of bounds, but it actually flattened them out a little bit. And then the defense, obviously, like you said, if you talk about, talent-wise, athletic ability-wise, I mean, they've got studs back there at TCU, and so it was just a great play. Even last year, they had the Jim Thorpe winner, and so they can recruit talent back there. And so I think it was just a combination of all of that led to an interception. Like I said, and it was still a bang-bang play as far as getting the ball and getting his feet down, but great play by the defense on that end of it.
Yeah, well, the positive is, I mean, Matterbebe made another just massive
catch. I love that play.
God, I mean, Matterbebe in the open field, he is fun to watch. I mean, you can see that he was a really highly rated prospect who spent time at Florida and USC before he came here, Illinois obviously as well. But wow, he has 9 catches this year. He's averaging 30 yards a catch. I guess my question is how, understanding that he also has been pretty limited because of injuries, which has kind of been the story of his career. How can you work to get him the ball more, or just get him more involved in the offense? Because it seems like, I mean, that is a piece that is extremely explosive that you do have sitting there that hasn't probably been utilized as much as he could have been.
He's made some great plays this year, right? He's made, starting off at the Stanford game, he put 1 or 2 on the ground, but he came around after that, made a diving catch in that game, made a 4th down catch later on in the season across the middle on a dig route. He's caught 2 big balls going down the seam against Nevada, now against TCU. And so the talent is there. Like you said, injuries is something that's hard to control, and it becomes some storylines for some players. And so the goal is to get them as healthy as possible and keep them out there. But averaging 30 yards a catch is something that's not sustainable if you continue to throw the ball to him. So feed him as much. Let's get that average down, which means he's getting more catches.
Right.
But for the most part, he's got big playability. Just got to continue to stay on the field and be present. But the talent is there.
Just a quick little update. Another thing I heard at the press conference today, as far as the offense goes, it does sound like Malik Knowles and Phillip Brooks, if they weren't going to practice today, would hopefully practice tomorrow. And so it seems like they're optimistic that they'll be available. And Joe Irvin is going to be back. It was just kind of an illness, a virus is what they said, that kept him out of the game on Saturday against TCU. So that is good news, continuing along this theme of making sure that you are still explosive as you go into this game with Kansas. And look, it's a game that is going to, everybody I think understandably chalks it up already as a win. You can't do that if you're Chris Kleiman and the players, but bigger picture, gets you bowl eligible, keeps the momentum flowing. Then you're on a 3-game winning streak all of a sudden when you go into a game against West Virginia, which is a team that has caused you a lot of problems in the Chris Kleiman era and beyond. K-State has not fared well against West Virginia in the last 5 years. So that's obviously very important. You can start building on and looking forward to, hey, if we get this win against Kansas, can we be an 8-9 win team this year? That opportunity still exists out there for you. But in terms of the actual game, I think on a smaller scale, what you want to do is do the same thing that you did to Les Miles when he came in talking a big game the first year. You went out there and smacked him and beat him 38-10 in a game in which Kansas was supposed to be more competitive, right? Les Miles did the who is K-State thing. They had pushed in Texas Tech right beforehand, and it was okay, this is going to be a game until it wasn't.
Yeah.
Lance Leipold's a first-year head coach at Kansas. That to me is the significance here. Win the game, but win it handily, because you want to continue to assert your dominance in the state and just let them know, this is not going to change. Just because you may be a little more competent than Les Miles, which is not very hard, this is not going to change.
You mentioned the injuries, right? And we talked about, not having a lot of depth on the team in general. But as far as receivers, if Knowles and Brooks are unable to get out there early on, and then you've got the suspension for the first half, then we got to lean on Weber, Warner, Taylor, and Gardner, right? And so they've all had playing time. They've all made catches. And so I think for the first half, I think we're comfortable with the receivers we have out there, right? We may lose some explosiveness away from Knowles and Brooks and everything, but for the most part, you've got guys that know how to run the system. And so that's where you lean back on the quarterback and his leadership and saying, okay, put him in positions to be successful. But getting another top-tier running back gives you an opportunity to pound the rock. And so KU's going to come in. Now, watch the OU game against KU. KU played lights out. They were electric, right? Top running back, freshman guy, running up the middle, strong, tough. And so for us, it's one of those situations where if we can slow down what they utilize the most and cut down their passing yards, I think we've got a chance to control the game, and we can use the run game a little bit, play action pass, hit Daniel going down the middle on a post or a seam, and I think we'll be okay. But like you said, you got to go out there and actually do it. And so once again, we're not playing at home. You're going to have the crowd against you, and anything can go anybody's way. You just got to get started pretty quickly.
Yeah, so you referenced Devin Neal. I mean, he's the running back, a freshman that's been really good for Kansas, and that is one that stings a little bit for K-State. That was a pretty hotly contested recruitment between the two schools that K-State did not win out on. He has been pretty good. Jason Bean, the quarterback, has had some moments at times. I think the thing that has stood out to me in listening to Kleiman talk about him and just watching Kansas some this year, he can scramble. He's a quarterback that you're going to have to worry about him making some plays with his feet. But look, like in general, Kansas should be very overmatched. Outside of, I guess, the one thing that does give you pause, you brought up that Oklahoma game. If you did watch that game, I mean, I don't know where exactly Oklahoma was. I don't think it was in Lawrence.
Right.
2/3 of that game. And it took some heroics from Caleb Williams really to win the thing anyway. But outside of that, I mean, every other game has been so bad. And I think that's what just leads me to believe that was, I mean, I'm not saying anything earth-shattering here, but pretty fluky what happened against Oklahoma, because every other result we've had from Kansas this year would indicate that is absolutely the exception to the rule, including this past week when Oklahoma State just went out and thumped them. And I believe Spencer Sanders was out of the game, Oklahoma State starting quarterback in the first half, even it got that bad. So Kansas, outside of one magical Saturday against Oklahoma in a game which they didn't win, has been pretty rough this year.
Yeah. No, like I said, it's the Governor's Cup. This is a game that you play for all of your teammates from the state of Kansas. No matter where you're from, you take it as serious as possible. Understand that it means a lot to a lot of people in the state of Kansas. And so because of that, I expect us to go out there and play as hard as ever. How
much did it mean to you being a guy that came from Oklahoma? Because I hear that talked about a lot with Kleiman. He's always mentioned, like all the guys from Georgia that we have, all the guys from Texas, like they get into it because they know how much it means to the Kansas guys. And K-State has so many. The count that I saw earlier this week was K-State with 53 kids on the roster from Kansas, and Kansas had 19. So
oh, wow.
There's a drastic difference, and that's really been the case. And I think that's a big reason why K-State has dominated the series as much as they have, because the K-State roster cares about the game more. But for you, being an out-of-state guy, like how long did it take to really get behind the college?
It was immediate, right? And so I commend the coaches for pushing that narrative, saying, hey, this is a game that you need to focus on. But if I think about it personally, when I look at the wide receiver room, I would think about the Brandon Clarks and the Drew Thalmans and the Chris DeVos, Martez Wesleys. All those guys are from Kansas. And so that's something that was important to them. And even when we look at the quarterbacks, Jeremy Milne, like, is it everywhere you turn around, guys that you practice with, guys that you talk to, all had some type of Kansas background. And so for me, I knew when I went to go play Oklahoma, they would go hard for me. And so it's only right that you do the same for them. And like I said, the coaches would always make you aware that this is a week that you need to prepare, right? This is a game that we need to win. And so because of that, I took it just as serious as any other game, and honestly, for me, every game was serious, right? Just because football's a violent sport, you go out there not paying attention, get your head knocked off. And so, but it was always a game that we got up pretty early on. We never was really pushed by KU, but it was one of those games where it wasn't a stat stuffer, but it was a game that you look forward to because you knew there was opportunity to score touchdowns.
Snyder put more emphasis on this game than others, because I felt like I always heard that kind of as a rumor, like he really did emphasize the Kansas game.
Oh yeah, that was important to him. And so you knew come Kansas week, everybody's gonna have some tight butts at practice. You're like, oh God, here we go. Everybody wants to make sure everything is perfect. But you know what? If you think about it, it's tradition. You've got the Alumni Association, you got the fans, but for the most part, it's recruiting, right? You've got to win in your own backyard. And so if you don't win that game, good luck going to some of these schools trying to recruit some of these kids. They want to go where winners are. And so that was important to us to make sure that we continue that trend of winning against KU.
Yeah, and I think to me that just comes back to, again, like another one of the bigger picture points from this game, and why it's important to not just win, but win convincingly, is for just that reason, to make sure in-state, like kids around the area, you don't need another predator coming in and taking prospects from you, because right now it's been tough enough with the Nebraska, Oklahoma States of the world coming in and cherry picking some guys that K-State's really been hot after. Iowa, it's been another school they've had a tough time recruiting against. You don't want Kansas to become a legitimate, credible threat around here. And I think that's an initiative of Lance Leipold has been to do more of the local recruiting. Les Miles never really seemed that interested in it. Even before that, I mean, Beatty and Weiss didn't seem to be as interested in it as what K-State has been. And so that's obviously a huge part of, again, I mentioned the disparity in the amount of kids that you have on the roster. I just think that's such a huge part of it. And don't give them any breathing room as a program. Don't give them life. Do not make this a redo of the Oklahoma game at all. And Kleinman's doing a great job of that through the first 2 tries. Like I said, that game 2 years ago, really impressive, 38-10, and then at 55-14, I believe is the final last year. In a game where K-State was playing with Will Howard, they had the Phillip Brooks going crazy with the 3 returns that he had. So Kleinman has been, I think, as good as you possibly could have hoped through the first couple of Kansas games.
Yeah, no, there's still things we need to work on. And so regardless of who the opponent is, we need to go out there and continue to play penalty-free, convert on third downs, win field position, score points. And so, we still need to put up a lot of points. It's been a while since we've put up 40 or 50 points, right? So how explosive can we be? That's something that, that I got accustomed to when I played, right? I remember we were putting up 58, 60, 70 points. And so where's that type of talent? We have it. We just got to put it all together. And so anxious to see whether it's this game or the next game, but I want to start seeing some points on the scoreboard to where we can start separating ourselves.
What was the best Kansas memory that you have from your career?
We played at Kansas State, and I remember we would run this post on the outside, and the safety kept jumping way inside. And so I told Coach Peterson, Greg Peterson, that is, I said, put me on the inside and run me on a post flag. It was literally like drawn on a napkin. And I said, tell Quincy on the outside just to run a post and let me go first, and I'll cross over top. And he was like, that's not going to work. I said, trust me, Coach. And we ran it. And they flattened out the throw, and I scored a touchdown on it. And I went back, and he said, we're not doing that anymore, but good job there. But for the most part, it was just one of those things where Kansas was always hard. They always were unorthodox on defense. They would just kind of do their own thing a little bit. And so there was always like what you think should work never really always worked because they weren't in a position they were supposed to be in. And so it was just like, talent level was just always different. We were just always that much better than KU. And it just felt odd because their stands doesn't feel like a real stadium. Their band is right there in the front. It's just different. It feels like you're at a strong high school game. But once again, it was a game that was a real game, real stats, real win-loss column. And so for that part, we always took it seriously.
Yeah, no, the results speak for themselves there. I mean, you guys took care of business every possible opportunity that you had during your career against Kansas.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, if you're headed out to Lawrence, it's an 11 a.m. kickoff. K-State's going to have back-to-back 11 a.m. kickoffs between Kansas and then West Virginia. So make sure you stock up on the 360 vodka from Holiday Distillery. Get ready with the screwdrivers, whatever it's going to be early in the morning to make sure that you're loud in Lawrence if you are headed to the game. Or if you're just hanging out, chilling at home, you certainly can do that as well. But really appreciate their support here on the podcast. Any final thoughts, Aaron, before we wrap it up?
7 sacks? Can we get 7?
Yeah. Well, that's what Felix said. He said that's his goal, man. Felix is going for the 7th sack against Kansas. I would imagine they'll probably do something to scheme him out of the game, but then, that frees up everybody else. So.
What I want to see this game is an interception. I don't care who gets it. Yes, let's get an interception and let's start that trend on defense.
I dig it. In case they could use some more turnovers. That is something the defense has not been that great at this year. Forcing turnovers. It's a game where you can do it. Go out, dominate, take care of business. Do not let your stranglehold go in state, certainly. All right, that's going to wrap it up for us. Appreciate the work of Tucker Franklin behind the scenes, as always. For Aaron Lockett, I am John Kurtz. Thanks for listening to the Lock It Up with Kurtz podcast. We're back at you next week with KU Reaction and previewing West Virginia.